Howdy. About 6, 7 months ago, I put together a few little maps and a blog post relating to kind of my attempts to map my home. And I gave it the little title, Foggy Spaces, for reasons that'll be clear pretty soon. And the reaction was really, really awesome. Like, a lot of people seem to kind of relate to it, and including Katie, who told me she wanted to talk on this, so I'm doing a talk on it. But like, it was kind of an exploration. It was kind of mapping my hometown and kind of mapping what it was to me then, and like what I recall like running around the city, Janesville, kind of what it was like. So this is where Janesville is. It's in Wisconsin. This kind of is a very simple view of like Wisconsin, but even if we do like add more things, none of these maps really strike me as nostalgic. I don't really get all like teary-eyed at all for like Janesville in this sense. It's a bit too abstract. It doesn't really say too much. The satellite imagery of it does kind of feel a little more realistic to me, but still doesn't really quite feel like home. This is my house that I grew up in, and this does. At this kind of level, I start to feel like, I feel feelings of warmth and kind of happiness. And every time I've kind of like flown back to Janesville, I've thought about little ways I can kind of like map my hometown. And like one of the ways that I liked and was going to try to do was to kind of take the route I took to school and kind of like just draw little pictures of myself as a kid and like little memories of like this one where I remember having a big stick one day and like pretending it was a sword and whacking it around on my way. This is a little parking lot next to my house, and there's a little hole in the fence here that was created by me and my brother and sister, who would always walk through it to get to school, basically, instead of just walking around, because no one's got time for that. But I haven't actually gone through and like done this too complexly yet, mostly because I don't want to use Google Images for it. These are all taken from like Google Maps. I want to take the pictures myself, and unfortunately I keep going back in the fall, just after the fall, so all the trees are stripped down and like it's not as nice looking. So I might be able to do this one day when I go back during the summer. But so that was kind of an idea I've been chewing on, and then another kind of thought popped in my head later, which was that every time I kind of fly over Wisconsin or like fly to Wisconsin, I'm sure you all have seen like little in-flight maps that show you like where the airplane is at the time. Or even just like looking out the window down at all like the checkerboard patterns of farms and such. It's always striking me as really weird that I can never really tell where Janesville is. Like even here, I think it's somewhere around here maybe. Like it's really hard. Like I don't really associate my hometown like that way. This could be Janesville from a plane. This probably isn't Janesville, but could be. This could be Janesville too, but there looks like this little weird thing. I don't recall there being that kind of bend in my hometown, but lo and behold, this is Janesville. It's a weird like little disassociation that I thought was kind of interesting. And I also realized, like, I think I took like one Uber in my hometown once to get from like the bus station to my house, and just like looking at Google like Street View, which is a pretty reduced view. This doesn't really remind me of my hometown that much. I have to like really kind of like, oh yeah, okay, Joseph Craig, I recognize that. That's high school, but like where the actual things are is a little up in the air for me. So I did a little post about kind of trying to visualize these and kind of reconciling them. And this is kind of where I started with just my walk to school, and kind of this is a mental map kind of the way I would take. So I distinctly remember like leaving my house, go down some blocks, take a left, go down a block a while, and boom, I'm here at Roosevelt Elementary. In actuality, it looks like this. There's this like little bend here that happens because there's a little dip in the road there that I apparently had never noticed. There's like a 45-degree turn right there. And I think that goes a long way to explain why like there's like disconnects there. Yeah. So when I take away kind of like little side blinders there, like you can kind of see that it's really hard from this view of like, yeah, this is where my house is in relation to this thing I recognize. It's really hard to figure out where my house is here. Like I really have to do like sit and like stop and like think about it for a bit. So I kind of expanded on that a little bit, and also thought of other places I visited pretty frequently as a kid, including Madison, Wisconsin, where there's pretty close nearby. But my family would always go to the farmer's market there. So we'd come drive up to the parking lot here, come out, go down the little strip of shops here, and check out the farmer's markets. Also, a few times for various school events, we'd come up and go to the UW-Madison Building Humanities, which is located somewhere over here. And some of you have probably seen this building before, but it's a really weird, brutalist, depressing thing. And it's really hard to tell, particularly for someone that's just visiting, which direction you're actually going in it. So I distinctly remember, like, some days I'd walk out and I'd be on the street corner in front of the buses. Some days I'd walk out and be next to State Street, and could never really tell which way was which. So the turning building is kind of my way to represent that here. As far as like designing it went, I think Fog's a pretty natural choice for kind of the unknown. It's not like I think it's a pretty well established thing. Like some colonial maps kind of did it back before they knew it was else out there. It's also probably in large part due to Warcraft 2, which I played way too much as a kid. They kind of represented Fog this way in a similar fashion, and at least one person did catch that on Twitter, replying to it. But I think I'm also I think a lot of people know that I doodle quite a bit. I draw maps sometimes. And I thought a while about like whether I should actually just try to draw these maps out instead. And ultimately, I really like the idea of using satellite imagery because we kind of look at it and it seems more true. Like it's a lot harder to fake satellite imagery, although there are places in the world that do that. But I like the idea of trying to take like the objective truth and put it right next to this weird, subjective, completely personal stuff. And there were a couple other ideas I had for like other ways to kind of present this. One of them was just to take all those places that I remembered and like string them up together. This is not something I've done, but it's a really cool thing, and kind of it's a similar concept executed really beautifully. I recommend checking it out if you like the style there. There are also a couple like really abstract ideas I had. This is kind of a rough idea of like, so this would be Janesville, this would be Madison, Colorado, DC, and kind of like just draw out the different areas and like how much time I'd spent there, make the circles larger. This was a bit too impersonal for my tastes. I had another thought to possibly do like Janesville is just a dot, and then after being on this for like 5 seconds, it would zoom in, and you'd say that it's actually this really beautiful illustration of all my memories and like all the people I'd met there. But that would take forever to do, so one day maybe. Another was to like kind of stitch together different places that I actually distinctly did remember. But I liked the simplicity of just this, because I think it's a little more powerful and a little nicer. So after kind of doing this for like the places I've been to as a kid, I thought about trying to map out where I currently am. So this was DC. And basically this is after like about a year and a half of living there, and I had a pretty good idea where things were. And I had a couple of pretty good memories in a lot of places. But I did find it really interesting that I couldn't really separate out these places from a base map. Like with Janesville, looking at even Google Streets, I'm completely confounded by it and like, oh, where is everything? This is not where things belong. DC, I've used like Google Maps so much and like OSM and all those different things that I really don't feel like I ever didn't know where something was. Like anytime I go somewhere, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's in relation to this place. Which I kind of just kind of wave my fist in the air a little bit. I think partly because like it's not a bad thing. Like it's good that I'm not lost at all. But it feels like a little bit of a restraint almost that I can't make my own geography in the same way I did with my school routes without having that bias, and that I can only really add labels to this map that already exists. Not to say that I didn't get lost. On the more local level, this was where I lived, and there was a grocery store. And these dang roads, I have no idea. Almost every time I'd be like turned down the wrong way and be like, wait, what? How am I down the street now? So forward facing, I just moved to New York last week. So it's all very new and very exciting. And I'm kind of trying to do a self-experiment by not looking at Google Maps of the area, or like not looking at little Mercator web maps of downtown New York. This is kind of my current after spending 1 week there. I live in Brooklyn. There's a little piano technician down the street, which is kind of neat. There's way too many food options here. Went to a punk show up here once. I don't really know where it is. I took the metro to Manhattan, where there's just a bunch of mystery buildings and a fancy bookstore right over here. This will probably get expanded on at some point. But there's I'm thinking a lot of ways to try to visualize even that as I'm kind of experiencing it. And I kind of realized at one point I'm just kind of doing mapping as a diary at that point, which is really neat, but also kind of time consuming. And there's a certain question of like, how much am I observing and just kind of recording and making it versus actually just going out there and experiencing it that I haven't quite reconciled yet. So all in all, there's a lot of ways to map a hometown, probably. This is just one that I kind of came to. Although I do think it's still a little cold almost without the people, because I think that's still, every time I go home, I feel like I'm in Janesville, which is cool, but it's really the people who were there at that time that kind of made it feel like that place. And I think without capturing the people, which I don't really know how you would do that, but without them on there, it still feels a little off, but those are my folks and family. But yeah, those are some thoughts, and thanks.